about to speak with a representative of the United Auto Workers Union who is on the line. We'll see which line they are on. I think they are going to be joining us Wow. Okay, let's see if they're there. Hi.
Hi there.
Great. This is Rebecca Gross. She is a representative of the United Auto Workers Union. United Auto Workers Union is the organization that is sponsoring the strike. And Rebecca, what is your role there at the union?
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. I am a worker in the literature department here at UCSC, and I'm also the unit chair of UAW 4811 at Santa Cruz.
So you've been on strike for a while. This strike was started kind of in response to this police action in UCLA. Can you tell me a little bit about why the union chose to go on strike at this time in response to that event?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So our union had workers down at UCLA who were brutalized by police for peacefully protesting in solidarity with Palestine. These workers also, have seen things like suspensions and other disciplinary charges. Essentially, we're all part of one big union local. UAW 4811 represents 48,000 workers across the state. And an injury to one is an injury to all. And since, our coworkers down in Southern California were arrested and beaten and maced, we were able to stand up and strike over these unfair labor practices that our union filed in response to that.
So is the main beef about freedom of speech or safety or workplace conditions or all of the above?
Yeah, so it's obviously a workplace health and safety violation. The idea, that we could go into work, be on campus, see our students having a negative interaction with a police officer, try to go in and stop that, and then be brutalized, I think, is really disturbing to people. And so there's that workplace health and safety issue. There's also, of course, workers who were peacefully protesting, exercising their First Amendment right, and there's that issue as well. And so those are two issues that I would say the ULPs were over.
Now, there have been picket lines at UC Santa Cruz. It was a system-wide strike, but some reason they picked UC as the first of many strikes to happen in the UC system. Why did they choose our town, our university here?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I should say that this stand-up strike model that we're operating on was pioneered by auto workers over the summer, and it was a strategic choice to send certain plants out before other plants. And in our case, we have campuses, right? And so there were a few reasons, I think. One is that while our coworkers at other campuses were having to deal with things like jail support and sort of the trauma of police repression, our workers on our campus were not dealing with that. We were able to, talk to our coworkers, start organizing, letting people know there was going to be a strike authorization vote, getting folks ready for that. So I think we just ended up in a position in which workers on our campus were ready to stand up and strike first.
I know this is also a solidarity strike with the student protesters. Is there some danger that you might get confused with each other and some people who are doing unlawful activities like blocking a road, they might be mixed up with the strikers and thus maybe involve you in arrests that you might not have been part of? Is that something you guys are concerned about?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the undergraduate encampments blockade that has recently been erected on our campus.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's worth saying that this is not a tactic that we as UAW are employing. employ a soft picket. So that means that it's porous. People can come in and out as they please. One value of a picket, a union authorized picket, is that other union members often will not cross. So, for example, we've seen UPS Teamsters refuse to cross the picket. We've also seen our local metro drivers refuse to cross the picket. And that's just something we're able to do with a soft picket. In terms of the blockade, I understand why students would be as fired up as they are. The horrors that we're seeing in Gaza and in Rafah specifically this past week are just so horrendous. I understand why they're using this tactic. It's not one, though, that we as union members are employing. And I would just say I hope that that is legible to, both police and just general community members and other workers on campus who may take issue with this tactic that the undergraduates are employing, that's not the tactic that we as UAW are advocating for.
So some people would say that the university, or Cynthia LaRive, the chancellor, has exercised pretty large restraint on the UC Santa Cruz campus compared to some other campuses like UCLA, where the police were said to have stood by for 3 hours while protesters peacefully were attacked by non-peaceful protesters, counter-protesters, right, yeah, and beaten while police ignored and looked on. This letter that came out, I think, yesterday from the chancellor, though, sounded increasingly veiled threatening, I would say, to arrest people who were at least blockading the road, if not, there's also questions about the legality of the strike being levied against strikers. So I wonder if you're reading the same thing some of us are reading into those letters, that the patience is running out as the quarter is ending.
Yeah, I think that's a huge concern. And the emails that Chancellor LaRive sent out certainly, to me at least, seemed that they were potentially threatening. And one of the reasons that we're striking is for amnesty, right? Amnesty for protesters, and that means graduate workers who were striking or before the strike, but were protesting down at UCLA and UC San Diego and UC Irvine and faced police repression. But, I think it also means solidarity with undergraduate protesters who aren't UAW members. And the idea that the chancellor would ever unleash police repression on these students is horrifying to me. Many of my own students that I was teaching before the strike started are at the encampment, and I certainly don't want to see that happen to them. And in terms of this allegation that the strike is illegal, I would just say that the UC tried to file an injunction against our union local for taking strike action, and that injunction was denied by the Public Employee Relations Board. And in general, that is for the Public Employee Relations Board to make that decision. It's not for the university. So now we've entered, after the denial of the injunction, we've entered a process of mediation in which a couple members of our executive board are sitting down with a PERB mediator, and then that mediator is communicating with a couple individuals from the university side. So there's only been a couple mediation sessions to my knowledge, and we're hoping to learn more about how those are going soon.
What are the demands of this? I think you mentioned the demands of the strikers. How do they differ from the demands of the student protesters that are down there, the undergrads?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
How do the demands of your union, the UAW, in this particular stand-up strike differ from the undergrads that are blockading the roads, for example?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we are striking over these unfair labor practice charges. So whereas the undergraduates are, have constructed their demands and they're out here camping over that, there's no sort of legal justification for the action that they've taken. Us, on the other hand, our union has filed these ULP charges over illegal actions that the university took. And so although, workers were out there protesting for Palestine, and that's what prompted the UC to actually call the police on their workers and allow these brutalizations to take place. We're not necessarily out here, right, over the same demands that those protesters were protesting for. So that's, I guess, the distinction in some sense, right? It's we are in solidarity with those with our coworkers that were protesting for Palestine, for divestment, for disclosure. However, those demands themselves aren't what our strike is over.
There is definitely a community impact of this action, whether it's the strikers or the student protesters blockading a road. The other day, a lot of people who had childcare needed to get off campus and they couldn't. And I'm not placing that at the feet of the union because you just said you're not blockading roads. But I imagine the general public that's sitting in giant traffic snarls or getting stuck on campus, or students who are not able to attend classes at the end of their quarter, may not understand the distinction and may wonder, is this getting the point across? There's two different points, it sounds like, that these two different groups are trying to convey to different constituencies. What would you say to the people who are just kind of, frustrated by the situation at its big picture?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because we're getting it a lot from folks in the campus community as well. And I would just say that, we want to be here to support our students, many of us, but there are also a lot of UAW members and other campus community members who are frustrated at the action that undergraduates are taking. And so I think one thing I would say to those folks is, take a breath, take a step back, and realize that these students are doing this for a righteous reason. They're doing this because they're, opening Instagram to see bombs dropping on children, and it's horrifying. And so I think I would suggest that people do their best to take a step back and see that reasoning. I would also say that although there was, a hard blockade for one day, there is now one entrance to campus that is open and accessible. And the students that I've spoken with, at least, have done as much as they could to ensure that people who live on campus, closer to the base of campus, are able to enter and exit through the blockade that they've put up. And I've witnessed them on my side of the picket, on the grassy patch that we picket on. I've witnessed them move the blockade multiple times to let people in and out. And I would just say that, as UAW members, we all have different politics and different positions in relation to what's going on in Palestine right now. But I think one thing we can all agree on is making sure that we have a safe work environment, that we can exercise our right to free speech, and that no one should feel like they're in an uncomfortable, unsafe, or unhealthy position when they go in to work.
Thank you. And in the few minutes we have left, Rebecca Gross from the UAW, I wonder what's ahead for this strike, how long you think it might go on, and secondly, what is it going to happen at UCLA next?
Oh, so actually, yes. So UCLA and UC Davis have both walked off the job this week as well. So they've been on strike since Tuesday, since Monday was a holiday. And we haven't heard yet which or if other campuses will walk off the job, although our union has made it clear that more campuses will be called to walk off the longer that the UC fails to resolve these unfair labor practice charges. So I'm anticipating that we will hear about other campuses walking off the job in coming days, if not tomorrow. And the strike could go as long as June 30th. That's when as long as members have authorized the strike to go right now. Although if the university actually comes to the table, we could see the strike ending earlier.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of this busy time. I know you were breaking down stuff from the strike. Thanks for talking to our listeners on Talk of the Bay. I really appreciate your time, Rebecca.
Of course. I appreciate you having me. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. That was Rebecca Gross from the UAW, who's on strike at UC Santa Cruz. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be talking with organizers of the Redwood Mountain Fair and giving you a chance to win a ticket to this weekend's fair.